Good evening. On behalf of the Indiana University College of Arts and Sciences, I would like to thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Vanessa Clow, and I serve as the college's Director of Alumni Engagement. Our Food for Thought live streaming series serves as an opportunity for alumni and friends to hear from faculty experts, explore topics of interest, and stay connected with IU and the College of Arts and Sciences, regardless of your location. On April 8th, 2024, North America will experience a total solar eclipse, which will pass over numerous states and countless locations, including the Indiana University campuses in Bloomington, Indianapolis, Kokomo, Richmond, and Columbus, Indiana. In collaboration with the IU Alumni Association, we are delighted to bring you a special series about this astronomical phenomenon. Tonight's presentation will offer insights into how eclipses provoke changes in animal behavior. At this time, I'm delighted to introduce this evening's featured presenter, IU Department of Biology Ph.D. student, Liz Aguilar. As a fourth-year PhD candidate in the Evolution, Ecology, and Behavior program, Ms. Aguilar's research focuses on understanding the neural and metabolic mechanisms underlying female aggression in wild tree swallows. In Associate Professor Kimberly Rosvall's lab, Ms. Aguilar dedicates her efforts to studying the nuanced variations in social behavior exhibited by this avian species. As an NSF GRFP Fellow, Ms. Aguilar is also passionate about science outreach and advancing equity and inclusion in academia. Following her talk, Ms. Aguilar will be joined by Professor Kara Wellman for the audience Q&A session. Dr. Wellman is a professor of psychological and brain sciences and the director of the Center for the Integrative Study of Animal Behavior. You can submit your questions at any point during this evening's discussion. Simply click on the Q&A tab located in your webinar toolbar. Hover your mouse over your screen and your toolbar should appear. Closed captioning is also available. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Aguilar for her presentation. Thank you.
Everybody, thanks so much, Vanessa, for that introduction. I'm going to get started by sharing my screen and making sure. So yes, like Vanessa said, I'm going to be talking about how animals respond to an eclipse with my talk in a whole new light, uncovering how animals respond to a solar eclipse. So I'll start by giving an overview of some of the topics I plan to cover in this talk. We'll go over some real brief eclipse basics, talk a little bit about circadian rhythms, how animals will respond, what we can expect when it comes to the big day on Monday, and then I'll go into talking about a project I've been working on called Solar Bird, and then we'll go into the Q&A with Dr. Wellman. Okay, so as Vanessa explained, I'm a PhD candidate in the biology department and an NSF fellow. I'm in Kim Rosvall's lab where we study behavior and physiology of wild birds. But I'm not the exciting part of this work. They are. These are tree swallows. They're the bird that I study in my dissertation. These birds are what are called obligate secondary cavity nesters. And that's a really long way to say that they need a cavity to nest in, but they can't make one themselves. Like we know woodpecker can use their beak in order to make holes in trees. These little guys have beaks that are way too small for that, so they need nest boxes that we provide them in order to reproduce and have chicks. So this leads to really intense competition for nest boxes, especially female-female aggression, which is what I studied. And right now is a super exciting time for them. They're making their way here for the breeding season, and soon we'll be seeing them in nest boxes around town in Bloomington, doing just this, bringing some building material into these nest boxes in order to prepare for the breeding season. So this period of early spring is super important for these birds. It's the peak of migration and establishment of territories for many birds. And so it's now especially exciting since this time is now aligning with this total solar eclipse. So some real quick notes about the eclipse that I'm sure everyone has been inundated with. What is an eclipse? It's when the moon is passing between us on Earth and the sun. And so totality is the moment that we're especially excited for, I think. And that's the time when the moon completely blocks out the sunlight. And depending on where you are in the path of totality, that period can last anywhere between 30 seconds to 4 minutes. And here in Bloomington, we're super lucky to be at the peak period of totality with almost 4 minutes of darkness. So as we reach totality, we're going to experience these shifts in environmental cues. So we'll see fluctuations in air temperature, wind speed, but the most dramatic change that we'll see is a shift in sunlight. So this unexpected darkness in the middle of the day is what will likely have the biggest impact on animal behavior. Since these light cues are most often predictable and a key factor when we think of circadian rhythms. So like us, animals also have this internal biological clock. It regulates behavior and physiology, that these processes occur over a roughly 24-hour period. And so this is super important because these rhythms optimize behavior. So it makes sure that important things are happening at the right time. So when we think about birds specifically, they use light to sync up their sleep-wake cycle. So waking up with dawn, going to sleep with the sunset. It regulates biological processes that are important for reproduction and parental care. They also use light to indicate length of day. So as the days get shorter or longer, they're able to migrate at the appropriate times and to their appropriate destination, whether that's their wintering grounds or their breeding grounds. So when we think about animals more generally, not just birds, what are some common responses that we would expect them to have when the eclipse occurs? So we know there are kind of some general behaviors that we might expect. So the first is the onset of evening patterns. So as it gets darker, as you reach totality, animals might start to think that we're approaching nighttime. So when it comes to nocturnal animals, those that are active during the evening, they might increase their activity. Whereas diurnal animals, or those that are active during the day, might not be as active during that period. There's also a chance that some animals might feel a little fearful or anxious during this period, or some might have subtle reactions or really no response at all when it comes to the eclipse. So how do we know that these are some of the common behaviors? A lot of past work on how animals respond to an eclipse is often anecdotal. So kind of just observing what's happening around at that time. There are actually reports all the way back from 1544 that reported that birds were falling from the skies. And I don't think it's quite that dramatic of a response, but I think it was a reaction to not hearing birds anymore, as they might have been reducing their vocalizations as they were thinking they were approaching nighttime. So community science has been a really big part of how we know any of this information. So one of the earliest examples of eclipse-related citizen science goes back to 1932 in this study by William Wheeler. So they were studying how animals and insects reacted to this eclipse on August 31st. And they had nearly 500 observations from the public, naturalists, game wardens that informed a lot of what we've been seeing in response to these eclipses. So we also had a lot of information from the 2017 solar eclipse. Specifically, there was this really cool project called Life Responds that had 600 participants and over 2,500 observations. So these types of public service projects can really help us generate a lot of data across a scale that is otherwise not possible. So this is kind of a lot of the beginning of how we know more about animal behavior. And another way we've learned about it is observing animals in zoos. So these are some examples of what was observed with specific animals at zoos during the 2017 eclipse. So for instance, they observed that baboons started to huddle together and move through the eclipse, through the enclosure together, and they were super vigilant during the entire eclipse. Elephants and giraffes also gathered, and they approached their enclosures that they would go into in the evening. And a specific anecdote was that an individual male giraffe was just pacing for an hour following totality. So maybe that was some indication that, he realized something had been weird in that moment before. And one of my favorite anecdotes, these examples from a zoo animal, is an observation made by these Galapagos tortoises. So this one specific tortoise became really active and was moving really quickly during totality, which, like a tortoise, isn't quite normal behavior. But what I think is really interesting is that after totality, this tortoise gazed up at the sky for a while afterwards. So I just think that's a really cool anecdote and observation that that's what we're going to be doing similarly on Monday as well. But we don't have giraffes or elephants in our backyards. And if you do, that's a really cool backyard. But what can we expect in our own environment on Monday? So one thing I do want to note is that all fingers crossed that we have perfect weather on Monday, but in the chance that it is cloudy, what's really exciting is that we will still see how animals respond. So even if it's not ideal weather, it's still going to lead to those shifts in environmental cues and get darker, and that is what animals are going to be responding to. So we're still going to see a lot of cool things, even if we don't get to see the big show in the sky if it's a little cloudy. So, right, what can we expect some animals in our environment to be doing? One thing is bees have been shown to cease their flight activity and return to their hive as it gets darker, just like they would in the evening. So they've been observed doing this as we reach totality. Is that something we might observe? Nocturnal animals like bats might start to fly out to begin to forage. Spiders have been shown to deconstruct their webs as we reach totality, which again is an evening behavior. And as we're familiar with here in town, we might start to see the deer come out even more as we experience that shift in light. And something that's really interesting is not just what we might be seeing, but what we might be hearing. So it might start to sound like nighttime. So we might hear crickets increasing their vocalizations, and that being potentially the loudest right before we reach totality. And so I have a little video from the 2017 eclipse that shows what we might expect when it comes to the sound around us. So let's see here.
Hey, Joe Gilder here.
I'm just going to fast forward. There's a lot that we don't need to hear. And we should be here.
Let's jump in here and see what it sounded like, shall we? Okay, as you can probably tell from the video outside, it's noisy in the South in the summer, just in general. The cicadas are always doing their thing. So there's a noise level that's already there. What's interesting is how much louder it got when the eclipse happened. Check out the footage. Okay, here's the total footage that I recorded. It's about 40 minutes of audio. I set up the mics. We drove to a nearby park to experience the eclipse there, came back and checked out the recording. I've divided it up into 3 sections, roughly equal. They're about 11 minutes each. This is the 11 minutes before the eclipse. This is during the eclipse and kind of the immediate aftermath. And then this is the time after. So as a baseline, here's what it just sounds like in the normal, just a normal afternoon in Nashville sounds like. And just so you know, I live in the Nashville city limits. We're not really out in the country, but it still feels fairly rural. But you can hear other people around and things like that. So you can hear people off in the neighborhood hooping and hollering and getting ready for the eclipse. So that's normal. That's about the amount of volume outside on a given day. What's interesting, if you look over here, this blob of audio is a lot bigger. Here's what that sounds like. So aside from the normal sounds of traffic driving by and things like that, it is noticeably louder when the eclipse happened. And then what was also interesting is, like, long time after the eclipse, a good 10 minutes after the eclipse was over, it was quite a bit louder than before. To review, before sounded like this. Once the eclipse happened and it got dark, it sounded like this. You can hear people screaming in the background. And then once the eclipse died down and the bugs chilled out, it was still kind of loud. Now, if this wasn't nerdy enough for you, I actually got out of...
We'll bypass the math that he goes into after that. That's not important for this. But that was just, I think, a really cool representation of what we might hear in those shifts. So that's something to not forget to pay attention to during the day, is that progression of shifts in sound, not just what we're seeing, but what we're hearing. Okay, there we go. So what else can we expect? Coming back to what's near and dear to my heart, what are birds going to be doing? Some of the things that we know from that past work is that birds might stop feeding at feeders. They are likely to decline in bird song. And then there's a chance that we might experience what is called a second dawn chorus, when the light reemerges as if it's a new day. And animals, birds like crows and chickens might return to roost together for the night, either together in the trees, just to kind of indicate that progression of an evening behavioral shift. And so one of my favorite videos of this returning to roost behavior and the second dawn chorus occurs in this video here. Let's see.
Her var tullja foton I morgon, som vanligt, hønenar I høstnarhusen vi Vittelgardalsvegen I havn. Og alt var frisalt, som det pleier. Inntil mannen byrja skugga fyrir sólene holgon nudgetøyna, og så hente brottlig okkurst.
I just love that video. The music definitely adds to how much I love it. But I think that again is a really cool indication of how, you know, these chickens thought it was, you know, approaching nighttime. They go into roost together. As the light comes back, rooster calls for a new day. So that's a really dramatic behavior that we might observe if we're lucky enough to be around chickens on that day. But, you know, based on a lot of this past work, we do know a lot, but there's still a lot that we don't know. When it comes to birds, you know, they use light to match their behaviors to the environment. So there are a lot of questions about how they might respond to this eclipse and that dramatic shift in light. So maybe we'll learn, you need to know more about whether they're going to be stopping, you know, these behaviors that they're already doing right now, like fighting each other for territories or trying to woo each other. And will they stop doing that and shift towards their evening or bedtime-like behaviors? So because totality covers such a large area in a short amount of time, it would be impossible for one scientist or one group of researchers to get enough observations to really understand why animals respond more strongly to an eclipse than others. So to start to kind of get at that, we have developed an app called Solar Bird. And this project, we hope to have the public help us investigate how birds respond by collecting data on bird behavior throughout the progression of the eclipse. So Kim and I have collaborated with Joanne Tracy to kickstart this project and teamed up with folks at IU Alumni School of Informatics, Computing, Engineering, Paul Macklin and Sean Dixit, who's a master's student who has done the magic work of actually creating this app. So the goal for it is that participants will find a bird in their environment, and before, during, and after totality, they'll observe its behavior for 30 seconds. So we have a pre-selected list of behaviors that you're likely to see, because we really want to just make sure this is a streamlined process and that it's only a way to really enhance your experience of watching the eclipse. So we don't want anyone to be on their phone much during that day. And so it's accessible for individuals at all levels, from avid birders to young naturalists. You don't need to have any prior knowledge of birds in order to participate. And it can happen anywhere. You can collect data at home, local park, by looking out a window, wherever you might be watching the eclipse. So we just really wanted to engage the public and enhance that day. So it's available on Google Play Store for Android. It will be up on the Apple App Store within the next day. This QR code takes you to our website that talks a little, explains some more about the app. But really, ultimately, we just want to collect more biological relevant data that, you know, really adds to this growing knowledge gap that, you know, we're learning more about how animals respond to an eclipse, and really just want to encourage everyone to relish, you know, the full experience of the eclipse, and to not only think of looking up at the big moment, but also taking stock of what's happening around us in our own environment, as nature is also witnessing this pretty incredible natural phenomenon. Okay, so with that, I just want to thank you, everyone, for your time joining us here for this talk. And now I'd like to invite Kara to join us for the audience Q&A.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for that really interesting presentation. I think I will get the ball rolling with a question. So I'm curious, so you talked a lot about sort of wildlife and how they might respond, but what would you expect to see? What might we see with pets? Like, would you expect them to be doing similar kinds of things?
Yeah, so I think that's a really, big question on a lot of people's minds is, how's my dog going to respond to this? We definitely wouldn't expect any type of response in terms of, any safety concerns when it comes to, our dogs or our cats looking up at the eclipse. They know better. They don't do that on a normal day, so they're unlikely to do that on Monday. I think there's some indication that, really it's going to be the influx of people and maybe crowds and excitement that would be the main thing to consider for our pets, especially if we have dogs out with us, at an event to watch the eclipse. Just making sure we know how our dogs or our pets behave with other people, other dogs with big excitement. But other than that, I really think it's just kind of knowing the temperament of your pet. But when it comes to the actual eclipse, there's no real indication that they'd be harmed in any way.
We have some questions from the audience. So Robin asks, do you only want people in totality to use the bird app?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. No, anybody who is in the path of the eclipse, but it doesn't have to be in that peak totality. Having observations at all kind of locations of where the eclipse is passing is really key to us learning more. Is it that us here in that 4 minutes of totality might be observing differences in behavior as opposed to birds that are in an area where it's that only 30 seconds of totality. So having that wide range of observations is definitely key.
And then Jill would like to know, should we put our wild bird seed out any differently during the eclipse?
Yeah, I think I don't think there'd be any reason to do that any differently. I think it might be a way to kind of bring birds into your backyard a little bit more, to have them around for that day to observe potentially. But I don't think there's any reason not to kind of go about the, placement that you would normally for that.
Okay, thank you. Lacey would like to know, what do you think owls might do during the eclipse?
I am so excited for that. I wish I heard somebody who their neighbor has an owl who is just like consistently in their backyard each evening. I wish I was that lucky to have that, because I would love to be able to hear whether we get to hear if those owls are out. So yeah, I think there's a really good chance that we'll start to hear their vocalizations come through, see them kind of come out as we reach totality. That's one specific bird I wish I knew one was close by to keep an eye out for, because I think that'll be one of the most maybe noticeable sounds that we'll hear as we reach totality, are the owls. Yeah.
This next one is not a question, it's an offer. So Molly says, we are located in Mexico and are happy to share the app with our network, if that would be helpful.
Oh my goodness, that would be incredible. Yes. We've would love to get this as wide as we can. And yeah, knowing that it comes through Mexico would be amazing. Yes, thank you so much.
Oops. Okay, so Braden would like to know, has your group studied sea animals around the state or the country, and what is the difference between how they might respond compared to land animals?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about sea animals. No, we don't study them. I think that, I wonder if anyone is. I think that's that's definitely not something I've ever come across, is how any sea animals respond to an eclipse. I would imagine, maybe some, with that, they're going to be experiencing those shifts in light, just like any animal on land would be, but maybe it's not quite that big of a cue as it would be for some other land animals. But yeah, maybe that would be more of a indication of perceiving that shift, as opposed to maybe what their like evening, nighttime, bedtime routines would be. But be really curious to see if that just leads to any more investigation of those animals. But that's something really interesting to look out for.
So I have two questions about using the app. So Catherine would like to know if you have a preference of when we should use the app, like before, during, or after the eclipse, or all of the above.
Yeah, all of the above, actually. So the goal is to have 3 observations. So one before totality, one during, and one after. So the app will also have notifications to kind of let you know when we're reaching totality. So when it comes to the observations for before or after, those can really happen at any point. I don't think you'd have to, worry about any observations at like 7 in the morning or super early in the day, but just kind of as you're going about, the events of the day, kind of just clocking those before and after. During totality is going to be a little more of a, more strict of a time period to ideally get it between during that peak of totality. So you'll see in the app that it's 3 observations at each of those time points, and just the before and after are a little bit more at your discretion when those occur.
Robin asks, I'm in 92.8% totality. Is there a way on the app to note what the percentage of totality is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a screen in the app that will use your GPS coordinates to help indicate at what stage of the eclipse you are. So it'll say your percent of max eclipse, or at what stage you're at. And there's a little graphic that's part of it that'll show you kind of an indication of the moon crossing.
So the app will keep track of that for us.
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
Yep. And again, like it'll come up with notifications to say like an hour before max totality. So it kind of help guide that period.
Great. So a couple of questions about sort of more specific possibilities of behavior. So Gila asks, is anything known about how wolves might behave during a total eclipse?
Yeah, I haven't come across anything specifically about wolves, but if we, take the past work, past observations that animals might respond as if it's, nighttime, maybe we will see or expect that wolves will start to come out. Will they howl at the eclipse? I don't know. That would be super cool. But yeah, maybe that's, kind of that evening sunset nighttime behavior is sort of, what I would probably expect from wolves or any animals of that kind.
And then Sharon is wondering, so why wouldn't nocturnal animals just sleep right through the event and miss it? What would like trigger them to notice?
That's a fantastic question. And I think that's why we need to get more information on it. I'm wondering if it's kind of the timing of the day that will kind of trigger kind of those responses. I think that's definitely also just a really possible response for those animals, is that maybe, you know, especially in locations where it's 30 seconds of totality, that it's not enough to kind of elicit any shifts in their behavior. Yeah, they might just still sleep right through it. Yeah, I am wondering when it comes to like, especially locations here where we're having like big eclipse events and watching viewing parties, if, you know, the human activity of the day might also contribute to shifts in animals, animal behavior. Just the influx of people or more sound might indicate, you know, reasons that they might be offset of the like kind of normal routine. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing to learn more about, is if and which nocturnal animals might respond and others that might be, you know, completely out of the shifts of the day to like really respond enough.
Thanks. So Karen is curious if the 3 to 4 minutes would be enough time for bats to emerge.
Yeah, I mean, it's been observed that that's happened, but that is kind of one of the main things also like on my mind is 4 minutes enough, you know, to expect animals to be like, wait a minute, no, it actually is nighttime, because it's like happening for a good amount of time. But for some, it might not be enough to really trigger kind of the more under the skin processes of, you know, shifting their behavior in that way. Yeah, I think that's what's really interesting. There's so much we don't know, and I think it's been observed that that is enough time. So maybe we'll see that here, that 4 minutes will be enough time to elicit that. What I think will be interesting is if 30 seconds, kind of the outskirts of the peak totality, is enough to see any shifts. So yeah, we'll see. We know it can happen, but to what extent is still kind of unclear.
Leisha would like to know, is there a section on the app to record behaviors for other animals like squirrels and bunnies, geese?
I wish. When we first thought of this idea, my goal was just to have any observation of any animal you saw around you, but that's really hard to do, especially in developing an app. So we had to start to limit our scope a little bit ourselves, and that's when we kind of narrowed in on birds. But that's not to say you shouldn't pay attention to what squirrels and geese. Well, geese we'll include it in this, but any squirrels or rabbits, definitely keep an eye on them and see what they're up to.
And Jill has an important app question. When will it be available in the Apple Store?
Yes. This has been the only thing on my mind for the last 48 hours. It has been pushed through to the Apple Store. It should be through its review process. And if all goes well, it will be available for Apple users tomorrow. There were a lot more bugs than we expected going through our first time developing an app, and the master student, Sean, has really been a rock star in working through everything and doing his best to get it up there as soon as possible. So keep checking, and by tomorrow, we're hoping it'll be up. And if it's not, when you search for it, sometimes we learn sometimes it can take a little bit for it to be indexed in the App Store. So please don't lose hope and keep checking back if you're an Apple user. It will be ready before Monday. Just keep checking. Hopefully it's tomorrow.
So one more app question, and then we'll switch to a couple of animal behavior questions. Does the app take or want any photos?
No, that is another thing we thought about in developing the app, was to collect photos of the bird you were observing and maybe even audio of bird song or what you were hearing. But we decided that that's really hard to do, and we didn't want to expect users to go through a lot of steps. So it'll just be observing behavior, and then there will be a question after that that will have you estimate the bird size. So we can kind of start to get an indication of what bird was being observed.
Jack would like to know, would crepuscular animals have a more intense reaction than nocturnal animals?
Yeah, maybe. You know, with that shift happening, it's not, you know, it's pretty gradual, right, as we reach totality. So yeah, maybe having, you know, those periods right before and after peak totality would lead to them, you know, responding more, since that's definitely out of, you know, the routine of a normal day. So yeah, I think that's something to definitely watch out for. Yeah, it's a really good question.
And then Steve asks, your special area of study is tree swallows. How would you expect them specifically to behave during the eclipse?
Yeah, I really wanted to go to one of our field sites during the eclipse, but I think Bloomington's going to be a little crazy to travel around. So I don't think I'm going to do that for my own safety and making sure I'm catching everything I want to. But I do think that what they're most likely to do as totality approaches is to start to roost together in the trees as they would in the evening. That's what I would expect. They are at their nest boxes, but they don't sleep in those nest boxes at this point. So if they're going to be doing their bedtime routines, that would mean roosting together up in the trees. We are going to be putting out RFID or tags that will be located on some of our nest boxes. So if a bird or tree swallow that we have banded will go into a box, that'll trigger a reading. So we will know if they're going in and out of their boxes more or less during that time. And we'll also have recorders, like wildlife recorders, out at different locations around Bloomington to hopefully capture changes in bird song. So maybe the tree swallows will also, as they roost together, won't be as vocal as they often are at that point.
And then Jerry asks, if it's cloudy, will we still experience a totality?
Yes, yeah. So we won't get to see the moment, you know, kind of, you know, the peak of that. But right, even if it's cloudy, we are going to see, you know, and experience that shift in light. It's still going to get dark. It'll still move past that, and the sun will, you know, come back after peak totality. So even if it's cloudy, we'll still, you know, in our environment, see the effects of the eclipse.
And then Catherine would like to know, are nest boxes recommended for just anyone to put out? Could anyone just put a nest box out to, you know, attract more birds?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of know what birds you're seeing, you know, commonly around your area, to know what's, you know, best for them. Some birds don't need nest boxes. Some do prefer them like ours, as well as like bluebirds. So yeah, I think just kind of doing a little bit of research to know good placement or kind of just what would work best for those birds around. But it's always kind of a nice, kind of way to not just enhance your own experience of watching birds, but providing that, you know, nesting site for birds coming through for the breeding season. So yeah, I think, kind of looking into what works best for your backyard and the birds around you. But that could be a really cool way to, keep bird watching.
Well, thank you, Liz. And at this point, one more question. Gabrielle would like to know, did any of the faculty record anything about bird behavior during the eclipse in Bloomington in 1869?
Oh, wow. I don't know that, but I would love to know if they did. As what I've heard about, what was happening in Bloomington during that, I haven't heard anything about watching any animal behavior during it. But that would be super cool if they did, but I haven't come across anything of that, but I'll definitely make sure to look into that.
Well, thank you. I think at this point, I will hand things back over to Vanessa.
Great. Thank you again so much for joining us and participating in this evening's live stream. I would like to personally thank Ms. Aguilar and Professor Wellman for their time and expertise. We are grateful to you all. Finally, I should acknowledge that events like this would not be possible without the support of donors who understand the value of a liberal arts education. If you would like to support programs like tonight's presentation or other opportunities that connect alumni and friends with the College of Arts and Sciences at Indiana University, please consider making a contribution to the IU Bloomington College Alumni Engagement Fund at the Indiana University Foundation. We hope to see you next time. Until then, please take care.